Hi, this is attorney Jamie Miller, and I'd like to welcome you in to another edition of the Miller Law Chronicle podcast. Today, attorney Deborah Stencil, and I are going to talk about a smorgasbord of different topics. We're going to talk about the weekend, the Harley-Davidson festival, just different amazing things going on in Milwaukee over the weekend. But we're also going to talk about bankruptcy filings, and the absolute importance of disclosing information. So important. So thank you for listening to this podcast. Appreciate you so much. Please subscribe on Google Podcasts, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I hope you enjoy this segment, and we will look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you. Hi, this is attorney Jamie Miller, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Miller Law Chronicles podcast. Today, I'm here with my partner, Deborah Stencil. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for joining me. We have some interesting things to talk about, and I want to remind everybody to make sure that you subscribe to us, you like us, whatever it takes on your favorite podcast network. I love that. The more people that subscribe, the better content, and the more content that we'll be able to bring you. So please like us and subscribe to us wherever you catch your podcasting. Today, we're going to kind of do a smorgasbord of different topics. I don't know if you've been enjoying your summer. Last weekend, I had the best summer Milwaukee weekend. It was wonderful to be here.
Oh, that's great. Did you do anything, or
yeah,
did you enjoy the weather?
Did a lot. We went to, it was Harley's homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you know this, but on 43rd and Highland, where Harley has one of their original factories, since they're not really doing much production out of that factory, and since a lot of their employees are now working from home, apparently a lot of employees are manufacturing motorcycles in their home now. So I'm not sure how that works. I'm just kidding. But so they took this huge parking lot and they made the most beautiful park. It's called Davidson Park. It has a huge amphitheater. It has swings and stuff for kids and a spot for a huge stage in the middle. It is a remarkable community asset that Harley put out there, and I can't recommend enough for those of you in Milwaukee to go check it out. So I think I'd love to see you and Matt go see it in the next couple of weeks if that's something you have time to do.
Yeah, that is on the list. How is it for animals?
Very friendly for animals.
Yeah, maybe we'll take the puppies.
Yeah, it's very friendly for animals. And then the other thing is I went to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Ooh.
The main stage at Veterans Park. And one of my favorite things to do is to find affordable concert tickets. And so ask me how I do that.
How do you find affordable concert tickets?
It's really hard. I mean, it's really hard, but you got to wait to the last minute. And so, most tickets are electronic, so it's a little bit harder. You can go to your StubHubs and TickPicks and SeatGeeks and all those places. But this was a bracelet situation. So they didn't have electronic tickets for this event. You got a bracelet. And so I knew when there was a bracelet or a ticket that Felicia and I, my wife, would be able to go down there, perhaps be able to buy one. So the tickets for the show were $135 each. And Felicia and I went down there with the mindset, if we get in, great. If we don't, we can stand on the outside of the gate and listen. But we were able to find someone selling the wristbands for $35, wristband. Oh. I was able to negotiate it down a little bit to the 35. It worked out really well. And it was a good show. I don't know if you read the reviews. The reviews weren't great. They kind of, didn't play all the greatest hits, and they didn't interact with the audience too much. So there was a lot of complaints, People were leaving early, which was surprising. People were walking out Are you familiar with Red Hot Chili Peppers at all?
Sure, sure. I mean, I know that one song. I mean, I lived in the 90s, so yes.
You know the drummer Chad Smith, who looks like Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
Do you know that? Like, can you vision him?
Sure, sure.
He looks like Will Ferrell. So I convinced my wife, who's not knowledgeable at Red Hot Chili Peppers, that it was Will Ferrell. It lasted.
You
It lasted for a few minutes.
you are the best at that.
I love
You
that.
say things with such convincing tone that I often fall for your little japes.
Right. The one thing that really jazzes me about some of these musicians is when they come to town and they do, show up somewhere. So Chad Smith, who's probably the best drummer in the world, was at Sobelman's on, in the valley over there. Chad
Mm-hmm.
Smith's brother is on a much smaller band, was playing at a very small bar, local venue this same
Oh,
weekend, just totally coincidental. And Chad Smith showed up and played drums at this, small venue. So I love stuff like that.
oh.
So not to keep talking, but it was the Air and Water Show. It was German Fest.
Mm-hmm.
So and then we're Red Hot Chili Peppers. They're winding up their show. We're looking to the north at the stage, but to the south, German Fest was blowing up their fireworks. And so seeing the Red Hot Chili Peppers, looking forward, turning back and seeing great fireworks on a beautiful night just
Oh,
made me so appreciative and excited about living in Milwaukee.
that's nice.
Do you
Good
have
job,
any?
Jamie.
Tell me about your weekend. Like, what was anything last week? And now that it's Thursday, we can start talking about the future.
Sure. Well, last weekend on Saturday night, I had to take a history tour, a haunted history tour around City Hall. I work for this little tour company sometimes because I enjoy talking. And so occasionally they have me fill in. I don't do it regularly. And I filled in on Saturday with some folks, and it was a beautiful night for it. And, we started at the city hall, we go past the Pabst and all the way around town, downtown, up to the Pfister, which of course has great history and great ghost stories. And so it was a nice 2 hour leisurely walk through the city with people from out of town. So I get to show them what I like and tell them the stories that I think are interesting about the city. And that was a really nice evening. So you were at the concert while I was doing that, presumably. Um,
Right.
yep.
And can you give me some insight, maybe a ghost story about City Hall? Like, what do you talk about when you're standing in front of City Hall?
Well, City Hall is a fascinating building. It was built in 1895, and it's iconic if you're not from the city, but you ever watched Laverne and Shirley. In the opening credits, they focus on City Hall. It's a tall, sort of triangular building. It's shaped like an arrow almost. And on the credits in Laverne and Shirley, there were always words on it. Anyway, inside it is, I believe, 8 stories, and it has this atrium, so if you're on the 8th floor, you can see straight down to the marble floor below. And unfortunately, during the Depression, it was the tallest building in the city. So people went there to take desperate measures. And there was a string of these terrible events. And people from all over the country heard about it, and they were writing in suggestions. People wanted to put up nets. And this woman from Virginia wrote in, and it was published in the paper here, that maybe we should electrify those nets to prevent people. I mean, it's not the greatest
Right.
suggestion, is it? Have you ever heard of the Polish mayor of Milwaukee? Once upon a time,
No.
there was a gentleman who was the highest ranking Polish American in Milwaukee government. So his nickname was the Polish mayor of Milwaukee. He was the city comptroller. For some reason, and this is in the 30s, for some reason, he got very upset and came to work with a gun, which was less prevalent back then. And he ended his own life and shot his coworker. His coworker forgave him
In City Hall or outside City?
in City Hall. In City Hall. His coworker, Mr. Went, forgave him, which is great. And apparently the community did too, because there's a pocket park in Milwaukee dedicated to Mr. Kotecki.
A what park?
A pocket park. Milwaukee has these tiny plots of land here, there, and everywhere. I mean, we're talking the size of a small room.
Right.
They're called pocket parks. And I don't know if it's just there was a mistake in platting out two pieces of property, but this is dedicated, it's on the south side, dedicated to Mr. Kotecki and his service to the city, even though he had a bad end. But I think it's nice that there's forgiveness, that he, had a bad end, but,
Right.
we forgive
What
him.
year was that?
I apologize. I do not have that memorized.
No, not just. I mean, in what century?
Oh, it was during the Great Depression. Most of the
Okay.
bad stuff that happened. The building was built in 1895. It's absolutely gorgeous. You should go in and look at it if you never have.
At City Hall?
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful marble floors. The wrought iron railings are gorgeous. Old gas lamps have been converted to electric, but they're still there hanging on the sconces on the walls. Just gorgeous.
Right.
When the Depression ended, so did the suicides, which is great. Now they just say they hear voices and footsteps and flickering lights, and that some folks may still be lingering around the building.
Right. Well, let's talk about bankruptcy for a minute. And often you and I will have time to kind of chat and use stories that we have of existing clients to help educate people that are filing bankruptcy on some of the nuances. So why don't you go first? Tell me something's on your mind, maybe a client story and something we can learn from that.
Well, I had a client in the last 5 years or so who had been through terrible marriage. And she was, in fact, had changed her name and was more or less hiding from the spouse because of terrible things that he had done. And when you file a bankruptcy, it's very important to disclose everything you owe, everything you own, but you also have to say, here's where I bank and here's where I work. And there's a lot of clues inside the bankruptcy papers as to where you are and what you're doing. And it is filed in a federal courthouse. So in theory, someone could find it and read it and figure out where you are. So for her, we had to figure out how best to protect her while still fulfilling all of her duties of disclosing. And I'd never had to quite do this before, but it turned out to be not too difficult. We filed a motion to use an address other than where she lives as her address on the paperwork. And then I created her paperwork with all of the correct answers. And then I copied it and I covered up all of the answers that could reveal where she is, where she works, where she banks, anything that would point to anything. And I filed the covered up version and asked the court for permission to do that. And that worked out perfectly. And then the court accepted an uncovered up version and sealed it so no one could see it, but except for the court trustee. So it was great because she was able to get what she needed, was relief from her creditors. The court was able to get what it needed, which was all of her true and correct information, and we were able to protect her. And I think there's a couple of lessons in there, including don't be afraid to ask for help, even if you're afraid of what it might do to you. And, you have duties as a person filing bankruptcy to disclose things. So, it was a good story, I think.
Yeah, and it goes to the importance also in disclosing information and all of that. And, we often talk about litigation or learning something about people. Like if I have a client that, filed bankruptcy in 2020 and that client is in litigation or a personal injury claim or has other issues going on, or perhaps I'm an employer and I want to learn about that client. The information that's disclosed in the bankruptcy petition is something that's filed with the court. It's kind of like a social media post that never goes away. It's a snapshot of somebody's life at a certain point of time that can, come up and be used in the future in surprising ways. And let me tell you something. about a surprising way that just came up. I had a client that filed bankruptcy in 2020. And about 2 weeks ago, I get a subpoena from the Sheboygan County District Attorney's Office wanting a copy of the debtor's bankruptcy petition. And so I have, I've been doing this for 30 years. Certain things come up sometimes. I've never had this happen before. So,
Yeah.
number one, I mean, I don't know why they issued a subpoena. It's a public document. They could send someone to the federal courthouse and get a copy of the document. But the reason the DA's office wanted it is because my client was being charged with a theft.
Oh.
And the theft, maybe it wasn't a 2020 bankruptcy, maybe it was like a 2023 bankruptcy. Theft occurred in 2022. And so I called the DA and I said, never had this. What are you looking for? There's issues of attorney-client privilege I'm concerned about, and I needed to flush some of those things out, which I said, I have attorney-client privilege. This is a public document. I don't think I'm breaching any attorney-client privilege by providing it to you, but I haven't had communication with the client. I'd like to run it by the client. And I said, here's how you can get the document if you want it. It's public. Go to the courthouse and get it. So I go, why are you asking for it? And he says, well, the client was charged with this theft, or the defendant is charged with theft. We want to see if the items that he stole were listed as an asset on the bankruptcy. And so that was really interesting to me. And now you're thinking, why would somebody do that? So this was a domestic issue. So
Sure.
Partner and spouse got separated. If it's ordered that a spouse gets something and the other spouse doesn't turn it over, it could be a theft if they're absconding with their hiding it. So, the DA wanted to try to find this sworn document as to whether or not this guy disclosed as part of his assets. And there's a twofold problem there. Number one, did he incriminate himself by disclosing something that he stole? Right. The other thing is, for the bankruptcy purposes, did he have an asset that he didn't disclose on the bankruptcy petition? So he's in trouble both ways. And I did have a conversation with the client, just wanted to make him aware. I did reach out to him of what's going on. It just goes back to the importance of disclosure, but even more importantly, the importance of this document being as accurate and correct as possible, which can be work for you or against you, but for the most part, it's going to work. It's going to work in your favor. Have you ever heard?
Sorry?
Have you ever heard of something like that before happening?
Well, not a criminal item. I did have a client we had a very bare bones list of household goods. I don't have much. Very bare bones list of household goods. And then 9 or 12 months later, there was a break-in. And so my client filed an insurance claim for much more stuff than we had disclosed on the bankruptcy schedules. Now, there were various ways to explain some of that. Time had passed. Some of the extra things belonged to her child, and were provided by that child's other parent. And, some of the descriptions on the bankruptcy papers were vague, household goods, stuff on the walls, So anyway, so the insurance company was claiming, since it was so bare bones, she couldn't have had $12,000 worth of stuff a year later. So that was tough on her, because she maybe didn't get all of the payout she could have. I have a more uplifting disclosure story. It's a little dated because the world has changed quite a bit in the last 15 years. Some say for the good. In some ways, I would agree with that. I took over for another lawyer who left the firm that I was working for. And there was a client in a Chapter 13 who came in and said, I cannot afford this payment. So we sat down, we went over the terms, I went through his budget, and he could afford the payment. And I was like, okay, I don't get it. This is where we are. Go home, you play with the budget, and you tell me what's wrong. He gets up, he's like blocking to the door, and he turns back and he goes, there's something I'm not telling you. I'm thinking, no kidding. So he sits back down and he admits that he has a partner. And he was afraid to share with me that he had a male partner. And I was like, I'm sorry you felt that you couldn't share that with me. I'm glad you're sharing it now. Let's rework this budget. So we rework the budget, and there's something still missing. And I was like, buddy, you can still afford your payment according to this budget we've reworked. Why don't you go home and get back to me? So he gets up, he walks to the door. I'm kidding. Same scenario. And he goes, there's something else I'm not telling you. Okay. Why don't you sit down and tell me what it is? He goes, I have another partner. He had that. So the three of them were a family unit. And he didn't want to share that because he didn't know what my reaction was going to be and whether I would help them. And actually, once we went through everything, they were a family unit. They had one cell phone bill. They had, they all used the same insurance company. Everybody's income went into one bank account and they paid the bills with it. And by the time I got down to it, I was able to rework the budget, convert him to a Chapter 7, and they all started their lives over. But it took a minute to get there because, it was 15 years ago.
Right.
But so for him, disclosing that extra piece of information saved him thousands and thousands of dollars and a lot of heartache.
Right. Yeah, that's a lesson learned. Very, very important. I have a client now that wants to file a chapter 7 and has a semi truck that's owned free and clear. It's got literally 2.5 million miles on it, which isn't uncommon, I guess, for a semi.
Right.
And he, if we do a blue book on it, it'll say it's worth $28,000, and I can only protect about 15,000 of it. But he tells me that the semi's worth 13,000, that it's in bad shape, that it's there's just no way it's worth that much money. So I said, I just need something in writing. I need something verifying the value of the property. And and he says, well, I've gone to different dealers. I can't find the value, and no one will put it in writing. What do you do in a situation like that? Because, oftentimes we have clients that have these larger assets, but for bankruptcy purposes, when someone files bankruptcy, we need to disclose the value of the asset. We have to put the best value because we can only protect it. Because I'd hate to file the bankruptcy, say it's worth 13,000, which I could protect, and then the court say, hey, I'm going to have this liquidated. We can get 28,000 for it. How do you deal with that?
Well, you could have him create his own comps of a sort by scouring the internet and finding similar vehicles. Or you could use the Blue Book value and have your guy detail the problems and what they would cost to fix, perhaps with the help of a mechanic. You could let him file the 7 and let the trustee try to sell it. And if they can't get better than the exempted amount, they're not going to sell it. Is he still using it for work?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a risky one.
Well, yeah, what's interesting, and those are good suggestions. And I said to him, well, the good news is that, let's say the trustee thinks it's worth 28,000, and we in good faith think it's worth 15.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could always, hey, trustee, take my truck, sell it, get your 28, give me my 15, and you can always go out and find, another vehicle, the same vehicle. And he says to me, well, there's no way I could replace this vehicle for $15,000.
Well, then.
So what do I do with that?
Can he let sometimes you can buy it back from the trustee. is there a possibility that it's worth 20? And the trustee wants that 5,000 in equity we can't protect. Can he get a tiny loan to buy that 5,000 out from the trustee?
Yeah, that's an
Or work,
option, or borrow money or something like
right?
that.
Or work a deal where they pay the trustee in a year.
Right. Yeah. But the thing is, for purposes of bankruptcy, clients are often inclined to try to value it as low as possible. But when you press them on that,
I see.
it can be.
Yeah. Sorry, my laugh was not clear enough. I understood where that was going. Well, I can't replace, then it's not worth 15. If you can't replace it for 15, it's not worth 15, my friend.
Right. Right.
It's, that's not how that works.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Bless his heart. Bless his heart. So perhaps our listeners would like to know the difference between secured and unsecured debt.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
So do you want to do it, or shall I?
No, I'll let you do it, and I
Okay.
want to hear your example. And then you had mentioned that the collateral was dirt, and I have a story about that, kind of.
Do you?
Yeah.
All right. Mine's not much of a story, so we'll hear yours. So when you file a bankruptcy, your debts are categorized, right? And one of the bigger divisions is secured versus unsecured. When you borrow money, you sign a piece of paper generally that says, I owe you money. That is a loan, and it's generally an unsecured debt. If somebody takes the extra steps of attaching collateral or attaching that loan to collateral, that makes it secured. I'm presuming they do everything they're supposed to do under the law, right? So when you buy a house, you personally owe the money on the mortgage, but you also have the house in case you don't pay, they take the house away. Same thing with cars. But in the real world, creditors can get creative, and they will put secured loans on a lot of things, from designer puppy dogs to, and I had this once, a pile of dirt. So what's your dirt story, Jamie?
Well, how can dirt be collateral?
In this case, it was a lot of dirt, and it was high quality, like farming soil or something that was worth a lot of money. So the guy who was borrowing it, and I think borrowed the money for it, was reselling it to small farmers. So it had a secured loan on it.
Right.
But I still thought that's dirt.
Yeah. No, I don't really have a story, but there's a great country music song out now it's called "Buy Dirt." Have you heard that song?
No.
It's actually a beautiful song that is inspiring people to, put down roots, have a family, get married, buy a house, whatever, go to school, make your life better. But it's called "Buy Dirt." And when you're saying, buy dirt, it's saying buy a house, find a place you love, find a place you can call home. But I love that use of the metaphor, kind of buying dirt as just planting your roots and buying your house. I just think it's a beautiful song.
That's neat. I'll go look for that.
It's really neat. That's about it. Anything else we want to add to this podcast? We just moved our offices, and so we're doing some final touches. You can see, the new space that we're in. We're at 700 West Virginia Street. Moved out of downtown. We were at 633 West Wisconsin, kind of, in the heart of the west side of downtown. And we're in a new office, and everyone's really happy. So have some work in that area. And today's my sister's 65th birthday. So shout out to my sister, Terry. And we're going to go up to Door County this weekend to celebrate. So looking forward to that. Do you have any plans for the weekend?
Comedy Sports World Championships are still going on. So there's some playing and some workshops and running around and playing host. So that will be fun for me. About the new office, clients are going to love the parking.
Yeah.
They're going to love the parking. It's free and easy. It's going to be great. So.
And when we talk about comedy sports, of the different games that you play, how often does politics and kind of the insanity of what's going on with Trump or Kamala, or are there nuances, innuendos, statements, funny stuff that people will come up with?
So we all have our own perspectives, and that often bleeds into what we do. But the theory of comedy sports is it's comedy for everyone. And so we tend to not wade into politics. Certain opinions about the way things work in the world will come out because that's how people are. But for the most part, if someone wants us to impersonate Trump, we make a little joke about it and move on and pick another celebrity. Because it's really supposed to be everyone is welcome, everyone should be comfortable. If all ages show, so there's no swearing, no drug references,
Yeah,
hand
but
holding.
have we lost our ability to have a sense of humor and maybe say something funny about Joe Biden, falling down or something, if you can find humor in that, or something about Trump or something about Harris? It's not necessarily political.
Yes, we
Just
have.
because, I mean, during COVID and Biden and Trump telling us that we need to ingest bleach or something like that. Can you say that and have it be humorous, but not
You
political?
can. I mean, it has to be well done. So that's the key thing about jokes that are borderline is that they have to be well done from a place of kindness. Like nobody should ever mock President Biden for his stutter, right? But if he does something as a human that's a little goofy and that comes out in a scene, that's okay. But we're not going to mock his speech impediments.
Yeah.
So in the 90s, comedy sports did bring up politics a lot. We did make fun of President Clinton and his various trouble. But I think things have evolved over the years where we find that in this venue, our audiences are more comfortable if we're just being silly and talking about human foibles in general
Right.
versus the specifics of politics. There's plenty of improv that'll give you that bitey bite.
Yeah, I just saw that Saturday Night Live hired Maya Rudolph for the fall to do her bit on Kamala Harris, which will be funny.
That is great.
All right, I'm signing off. Thank you for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to just kind of talk and see what comes out. We'll be back next week. But tell people, what if they like our podcast? What can they do?
Well, I think they can click like and subscribe. We have a YouTube channel. I never understand what subscribing to a podcast does for me. I subscribe to the ones I like, but does it tell me what to do? I don't know. If you get it, subscribe. Otherwise, come back and check on us at our website, millerlaw.com.
Right.
The YouTube thing has been easy for me to click and subscribe there.
And what's it cost to like or subscribe?
Why, that would be nothing, sir.
I love that. Free. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Enjoy your weekend.
You too.
And we'll talk to you later.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.